welcome to The Kill File, your favorite true crime podcast. I'm your host, Brittany, and each week we will explore the dark corners of true crime, unsolved mysteries, and murder. Join me as we uncover secrets, investigate evidence, and dive into the chilling details of some of the most fascinating cases. Get ready for a journey into the dark unknown, because in The Kill File, nothing stays buried forever. Hey guys, welcome to episode 14 of The Kill File. First order of business is I wanted to say thank you to all of you guys who have reached out to me or have helped spread the word of The Kill File on your social media platforms. I am so thankful, and you have no idea what it means to me for you guys to do that, and keep it up. Also, if any of you want to help out The Kill File, you can rate us on whichever platform you listen on. This will help other people who are true crime connoisseurs to be able to find us. Also, you can head to the Facebook page and follow us for weekly updates and photos about the case. Visit thekillfile.printify.me/products to check out the merch that we have. There's some really cool items and some fun t-shirts that you guys will love, but it also helps The Kill File and spreads the word. That's it for business. Today's episode is going to be an under-the-radar serial killer named Anthony Sowell, aka the Cleveland Strangler, aka the Imperial Avenue Murderer. Also, if you guys ever hear me giggle while I'm talking, it's because I messed up whatever I was saying right before that. And of course, I edit those out so you don't hear it, but sometimes I giggle when I say the thing again. Also, I am setting up some blooper reels for you guys. You will be able to hear some of the things that I mess up. I'm not sure if I'm going to do that on a Patreon or if I'm just going to put it out for you guys to listen to, but I can tell you that it's hilarious because I mess up my words a lot. So I've never heard of this serial killer. I was watching a show that I like, and it's called I Survived a Serial Killer. And one of his victims was on there, and hearing her story made me want to research him further. And then I watched the documentary about this case and his victims. It was on Amazon Prime. It's called Unseen. Trigger warnings for today are going to be typical true crime with murder, manipulation of a corpse, rape, sexual assault, and drug abuse in case that's triggering to anyone. So let's jump in. Anthony Sowell was born on August 19th, 1949. He was one of 7 children in his family. His mother was a single mom to her children, and her name was Claudia Garrison. So it's said that Sowell's sister also had 7 children of her own, and unfortunately, she passed away due to some kind of illness. So all of those children that she had ended up living with Sowell and his mom and his siblings in the same house. Can you imagine the chaos of that house? It's unfathomable to my brain. Sowell's sister would go on to say in an interview that Anthony Sowell was just a mean child. She said that Sowell made it clear to her that he didn't believe his mother loved him. His sister thought that that notion was crazy, and it was her belief that it was actually the other way around. She thought that Sowell didn't love their mother, and so he just twisted it. So it was said that Claudia was unfortunately abusive to her grandchildren, but not to her own children. I'm not sure why really, but it said her own children, so Sowell and his siblings, would watch as Claudia would whip the other children, who were obviously her grandchildren. There was one niece in particular of Sowell's. I wasn't able to find her name, but that's okay. One source said she was once forced to remove all of her clothing, and then she was whipped by Claudia with an electrical cord until she bled, which is horrific. Then this source stated that the same niece was, trigger warning, raped by Sowell nearly every single day for around 2 years. And this had started when the niece was just 11 years old. It was absolutely disgusting. Raping your cousin? No. When Sowell was 19 years old, he enlisted in the Marines. And this was the year of 1978. While he was in the military, he trained as an electrician, and then in the year of 1980, he spent an entire year with the 3rd Force Service Support Group, and this was overseas. I myself was in the Navy for a short time, so when it comes to anything Army, Air Force, or Marines, I am dumb, as their terminology isn't exactly the same, so I had to give it a quick Goog to the 3rd Force Service Support Group and what that means. So what I was able to find when it came to his military service was a few pieces of information. First of all, the name of 3D Force Service Support Group was the redesignation that was given in March of 1976 to that group. This group was then relocated in October of 1978 to, I know I'm going to butcher this, Makiminato service area in Okinawa. The Camp Makiminato, rededicated in January of 1980, became Camp Kinzer. The mission of this group was to provide general support, intermediate maintenance support for the Marines' furnished tactical ordnance, motor, engineer, communications, electronics, and also general support of equipment 3 MEF. I don't know what that means. So before I go into his military background, I'm going to say that this last little piece of what the service group mission was, and this was from Wikipedia. Now, normally I don't use them as a reference, or if I ever check out the wiki pages about these killers or about a case, I use it to find other sources that I can usually use, but I don't normally use Wikipedia itself since anyone can write anything on there unless it sources a site specifically, and then I usually just check out that source, if that makes any sense. Before I use any detail on my story, that's what I normally do. I am a thorough researcher. However, I felt comfortable in this instance using it as personal experience from a military service group may be exactly what's needed to find out more information on this specific group or battalion or whatever. Because unless you're privy to that information, it may be hard to find out specifics, if that makes sense. Basically, what I'm saying is that in this specific instance, someone writing what the group does from personal experience is totally acceptable, because without it, no one may know what that group does when it comes to military service. Anyways, moving on. So I was able to find out that at Sowell's trial, there was a Marine who testified as to how exceptional Sowell's service was while he was in the military. This Marine spoke only to Sowell's performance in the Marines, and this makes sense to me that the defense would want anybody who can testify to the fact that Sowell wasn't always a giant piece of shit, but how he used to be and how he ended up were two vastly different people. I will also say that it used to surprise me, and sometimes it still does, on how many killers or serial killers were in the military. Being in the military myself, and by the way, the only reason I'm bringing this up about my military experience is so that I can have opinions on these type of veteran killers and feel that I'm able to have an opinion at all about this since I was once in myself. Does that make sense? Anyways, being in myself, I thought of all the military people being held to a specific standard and way of being respectable, etc. But that's just not always the case. I feel confident in saying that. You're always going to have your bad apples, and more I am finding that killers sometimes come from military backgrounds. It's just insane. It makes me wonder if it's because some people who go into the military go in to get a better chance at life and escape their own shitty or abusive or awful worlds. I saw this time and time again. It can be an opportunity for some people to get out of their home situation, and that was absolutely true for myself. I was in a bad place in my life when I joined, and just kind of floating around and getting wasted and not dealing with the trauma from my childhood or my life. And I just wanted to escape it all, but I didn't have anywhere to go. So I feel that. Thankfully, my life took a different turn, and I didn't end up being a total shitbag, and definitely not a killer. But I do understand how people can turn to the military to escape their situation or find opportunities for a better life. And while the military can absolutely do that, like physically take you out of your situation, in my own opinion, being in the military itself isn't going to heal your trauma or your wounds. And seeking help, therapy, or counseling is what will help. In my own situation, it actually exacerbated my problems being isolated and away from anything and everything that I ever knew, let me tell you. But it was also the first time that I would start to get some help for my mental health. So not that I agree with the fucked up things that people do after being in the military. I'm just saying I can understand that things can fuck with your psyche, but I digress. So after Sowell returned from Japan, he spent some time at Cherry Point Marine Base, which is in North Carolina. Then, when 1984 came, he was sent to the base Camp Butler in Japan. After this, he had to spend only 3 days in Camp Pendleton in California, and then he was discharged from the military on January 18th, 1985. Anthony Sowell would go on to become a crack addict, a rapist, a murderer, and an all-around shitbag. It seemed to be Sowell's MO that he would invite women who were addicted to drugs, especially crack, back to his place to get high, and this is when he would attack these poor women who had just come with him to get high or drink. Anthony Sowell would go in between the years of 2007 and 2009 to murder 11 different women. He would then bury their remains in his house or in his yard. Sowell would hide their remains as well, sometimes not burying them at all. He often killed most of his victims by strangulation, which is what earned him the nickname the Cleveland Strangler. All of his victims were said to be black women, and he would lure them to his home with promise of alcohol or drugs. One victim of Sowell's, named Melvette Sockwell, was talking on the documentary about Sowell and was saying that she admitted to doing sex work in her past life, and then went on to say that sex work has been around since Jesus walked, and that she wasn't saying it was right or wrong, it's your own moral judgment. However, she said when you start taking people and raping them and beating them or robbing them, then, quote, I say to hell with you, end quote. And Mel, you're right on. To hell with people who do that. And I loved the way that she said this. Melvette was raped by Sowell at knife point. And she said she did not know this man. She had never spoken to Sowell before, although she had seen him. She then went on to say that she never sensed anything bad from him. In the report, it showed that she was, trigger warning, choked, gagged, and bound during the torturous rape. She stated that it lasted for more than a day or two. Sowell then told Mel that she might as well say her prayers because he said he was going to feed her and then he was going to kill her. Oh, can you imagine that mental torture? Oh my God. Melvette said at this point, Sowell went to sleep. She was able to escape onto the roof of Sowell's home, where she was able to signal a neighbor to call the police for her. The detective told Melvette while he was taking photographs that she was a very lucky young lady. The detective told her that just a week before this, they had found a lady cut up in a suitcase. Oh my God, what an awful thing to hear after something you went through that was so traumatic. Holy shit. Melvette stated she believes that the man, Sowell, had no intention of her being out of that house. After this, Sowell was arrested and charged with the crimes against Melvette. He was sentenced to 15 years in prison. This is one of those good parts where you hear that he actually served his full sentence, which doesn't always happen. Sowell was then released in 2005, and when he was released, they had done an assessment on him beforehand, and it was reported that he was, quote, low-risk category for sex recidivism. So I had to look up what recidivism meant, and it says it's one of the most fundamental concepts in criminal justice, which intrigued me. It's in reference to somebody's relapse into criminal behavior, and this is often referring to after someone has received sanctions or somehow receives an intervention for their previous crimes. Sanction, when it comes to the law, in case you didn't know, because when it came to this usage of the word, I didn't know. It means a threatened penalty for disobeying a law or a rule. Yeah, I know I call myself out for being a moron a lot. I may have a bachelor's degree in computer science, but apparently I don't know basic fucking words in the English language, so don't judge me. Anyway, so they basically assessed that Sowell would be low risk for relapsing into his old behavior, and let me tell you, they could not be more wrong. On September 22nd of 2009, a woman named Latundra Lala Billups would go to police to file a report of a man that punched her in the face, choked her, and raped her while she was passed out. This victim was on the documentary that I saw about this serial killer. This woman went on to change her life around because at the time she was addicted to crack. Now she has a master's degree in social work and she is flourishing. Her account of what happened to her was awful, though. She said she had gone to Sowell's house. When he became angry, he actually hit her in the face, and then he grabbed a coax cable and strangled her until she passed out. She said when she woke up that Sowell was sitting in a chair staring at her, and she said that when she had woken up, that he had a look of sheer shock on his face. She believes that he thought that he had killed her, which I agree that he probably did. She said that he was just sitting there looking shocked, and this is when she started to get dressed. In my opinion, this was most likely the moment that she realized that she had been raped and has no memory of it. She said as she was getting dressed, Sowell threatened to kill her and himself because he knew he was going to jail. So she was smart and said that, quote, "You ain't going to jail, but I ain't coming over here no more." And then she was able to leave the house. Yes, she left the damn house. Good for her. She said he watched her leave and that she looked back a few times and he was still watching her. I don't know why, but the thought of him watching her skeeved me out. She stated the minute she turned the corner that she took off running and she called the police. In the documentary, it said it took the police 3 fucking weeks to get back to her. I'm sorry, what in the actual fuck? This is exactly why I chose to do this serial killer. You will see that time and time again in this case, women were reporting of being raped or beaten, and the police were not taking these women seriously because they were all drug addicts. It makes me so sad. A woman named Jewel Long was the mother of one of the victims whose name was Leshonda Long. And Leshonda was murdered in August of 2008. Jewel said Leshonda was her 3rd oldest child, and that when she was born, that Jewel herself was unfortunately addicted to drugs at the time. She stated that they had to operate on Leshonda the day that she was born, and that her mother stayed in the hospital with her for 86 days after that. After this, Jewel was finally able to bring her home, where she stated that she was able to stop, quote-unquote, messing around for a while, but unfortunately, she went back to drugs. She said she had done some crazy things in her life to get drugs, and she was pretty sure that when Leshonda started doing drugs, that she probably had to do some of the same things that she had done. Jewel stated that drug abuse went from her own mother to herself to Leshonda, and that's just how it went for them. It was so sad to see this mom who had lost her daughter. Another of Sowell's victims, named Crystal Dozer, her son was on the documentary saying that he didn't have a very close relationship with his mother and that he knew very quickly in his young life that she had a drug problem. He stated that he would find drug paraphernalia, crack pipes, and crack, and that sometimes that he would wake up at night and saw his mother doing drugs. He compared it to a child who sees their parents cooking breakfast in the morning, that it eventually just becomes the norm to see them this way. He also said that for about a week and a half, he remembers vividly that him and his little sister had a teaspoon of peanut butter for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. He said he kept the jar of peanut butter in his backpack and he would give himself and his sister 1 spoonful for each meal, and that was it. For a week and a half. Can you imagine that? Oh, it was so heartbreaking to hear him recant his childhood. This poor young man. Having to take care of his sister in that way probably made him have to grow up quicker, and that in itself is sad. He said that his mother, Crystal, and that's what he called her, Crystal, was always trying to get clean. He said he knew when she was trying to get clean because she would be around more often. It's so sad that a child starts to realize the habits of their drug-addicted parent like that. He said he also remembered one specific time when they were at his grandma's house, and his mother was upstairs on the phone, and he could hear her crying, saying that she wanted to get clean, but that she just kept going back to it. He overheard her say she wanted to be a mother and that she wanted to be normal and not addicted anymore. He said he knew when she came around, she wanted to be clean and to feel loved and to feel her family. Unfortunately, Crystal Dozer was at the age of 35 when she was killed in May of 2007. So before I talk about the story that was given by Vanessa Gay, I have to say an opinion of mine that is sad, but I feel it's pertinent. Sometimes it's easy to think of the survivors as so damn lucky to be alive, and yes, while they are lucky, a lot of the time the trauma that comes with these horrific things that victims go through is also something that will affect the rest of their lives. So, I first heard this story from the show I Survived a Serial Killer, and this was the story of Vanessa Gay and what she went through and how she survived Anthony Sowell's attack. At the time of watching this, I noticed that Vanessa had a hard time looking at the camera, and in my own opinion, I could tell that she used to be a drug addict just by her demeanor, her body language, and her antics, which I've seen before with people who were unfortunately addicts, which is sad. So then when I watched the documentary about this killer, there were a few survivors recanting their stories on there, and I was watching this one woman for a while before I realized that it was Vanessa Gay herself. She looked and spoke completely different. She was thicker, healthier, and spoke very well and seemed completely with it. So I looked up when each of these shows were made, And the one that came first was the documentary that was made in 2016. Then the show, I Survived a Serial Killer, came in 2021. So in 5 short years, this poor woman looks like she has gone downhill quite a bit. Again, this is just my opinion, but it broke my heart to see this woman was the same woman that I was watching from the documentary in 2016 where she looked healthy and you would have never known that she was a drug addict before the documentary. Then thinking back to how I saw her on the other show where she was thin, she couldn't look at the camera, and she seemed as though she had definitely been hooked on drugs, I realized that she probably went through another stint with drug abuse or was even going through it while she was giving her interview on the second show. After you hear her story, it's easy to understand why she has probably had a hard time in life. So Vanessa Gay admittedly jumped in and out of cars, which I took to mean that she was doing sex work. She stated that looking back now, she realized that she would get ready and that she had definitely looked like a little girl after getting ready. And this is when she was car hopping, which to her meant that some of the people that picked her up probably liked the fact that she looked like a little girl, which is absolutely disgusting and so sad. She stated that she was standing at a bank when a man with a cell phone went by on a bike. She said that he stayed in range of her so that she would overhear his supposed conversation and that he was saying, quote, "It's my birthday and nobody's celebrating my birthday." So she said to him that she didn't celebrate birthdays, but happy birthday. Then she said she thought to herself, does she want to stand here and wait for something else, or do I go with him? And I'm assuming here that she meant like maybe a John, like wait for another John, or even someone else to offer her drugs or a good time. That's just my guess from how Sowell usually lured his victims. She said that as they were walking together, people were saying hi to him, and there was nothing to indicate to her that the whole night was going to be terrible. She said when they got to his house and she stepped in, she could, quote, feel an eerie feeling. She then said as they went up the stairs and the closer they got to the top, she could smell something. She then said to him, quote, "So what's up?" And she said that she meant something like, what are we about to drink? Are we about to smoke? Like, what are they about to do? She said he then asked her if she had a thing and that he meant something called a stem. She said she stood up and handed it to him. When I looked this up, it said that this stem was a term used for a preferred type of smoking device for crack, usually a hollow glass tube or a glass tube with a bulbous round end, which I kind of figured, but I needed to be sure. Thorough research is my thing. On a side note, that's kind of funny, that when I copied the link for the source that I used to look up the crack pipe things, the source literally said, quote unquote, tools of the trade and how to spot crack paraphernalia. I'm pretty sure that my browser history makes me seem like an FBI's dream find. Serial killer browsing galore, weird terms, military stuff, and now crack pipe stuff. I'm on somebody's radar for sure. Anyways, when Vanessa stood up and handed him the stem, she said he turned his back and he put something on it. She said she heard the lighter and the sizzling, and then she felt a punch. At first, I thought she meant that she felt this from the drug use, but she was crying, which confused me. Then she said he turned around and he punched her in the face. She then stated he said to her, quote, "Bitch, take off your clothes." She said she did exactly what he told her to do. She also stated when he looked in her eyes, she said she had never seen anyone's eyes so evil in her life. Teresa said that his eyes were black holes with no quote-unquote spark or anything else. They were just black. So then she said that Sowell, trigger warning, raped her continuously and also beat her as well. She said this lasted hours upon hours. The next morning, she asked Sowell if she could use the bathroom. He allowed her to do so. On her way to the bathroom, this poor woman passed a room where there was a plastic sheet hanging over the opening of the door, but the plastic was pulled back a little. She then said she looked over and saw what seemed to be a dead body that was decapitated. I tried to find the audio clip for you guys, but you can see it on YouTube. Listening to her on the stand describe what she saw was horrific. It will stick with you. You could see that other people were tearing up in the court as she was just sobbing. She was absolutely horrified, and for good reason. Oh my God, she saw a body without a head. Can you imagine? There is no fucking way. She kept thinking to herself that there was no way she saw what she just saw. Then she said she had to go to the bathroom and back without even changing her expression or crying or freaking out. She said she couldn't let on that she had just saw what was in that room. Teresa said that she felt like she wasn't supposed to make it out of that house. Sowell kept saying that if he let her go, that she was going to tell. So Teresa replied, quote, "Tell what? It may have been a little rougher than I'm used to, but what am I going to tell?" She basically just said what she needed to so she could get the fuck out of there. She said when he grabbed his keys, that she basically walked arm in arm with him so that he couldn't be behind her. She thought that if he was behind her, that she wasn't going to make it. She said they walked down the stairs and opened the door, and she walked out. She described walking down the street limping and bleeding and saying her whole body was just done. Teresa then said he let her go on a Sunday morning, and all of the church people that she saw looked away, and she even heard some of them laugh. She was sobbing, saying that no one helped her. When she called the police, they told her to come in and file a police report. She was too afraid to because she was an addict and she didn't think that anyone would believe her anyways. So she said, quote, "So I just stayed high." Ugh, it was so sad to hear. So 2 weeks before Sowell was arrested, there was footage from a neighboring business that had recorded some disturbing camera footage. On the footage, there's a naked woman and a naked man outside next to Sowell's house. Apparently, this woman had fallen out of Sowell's second-story window. The video was a little grainy, which was fine by me, but you could just see her laying there on her stomach or kind of curled up on her stomach in the alleyway. And Sowell and this woman are both stark naked as he kept going towards the front of the house to what I assume was to check to see if anyone was walking by or had seen what happened. Apparently, he had brought this woman to his house with the promise of crack. The woman's name was Shawn Morris. She stated that she was headed up the stairs of his house when he came up behind her and he put her in a chokehold. He told Shawn if she screamed or fought him or tried to get away, he would kill her. She said at some point she did scream, and that is when she says that Sowell jumped up and started closing all of the windows. However, Shawn was sitting right in front of one of these windows, and she stated that she told God that she had found herself in a quote-unquote situation and to please not let her die when she comes out of the window. And then she says, quote, "'Cause I'm about to jump." You can see Sowell try to get her up, but he's unable to. It was said on the documentary that a passerby was actually the one who called 911. And on the call, he was frantic, trying to tell the dispatcher that, quote-unquote, she fell out of a window from the second story. The dispatcher was asking if she was breathing, etc., but the caller definitely didn't know what was going on. Shawn was then taken to the hospital by ambulance. When Shawn woke up, she said she asked the nurse for a phone so that she could call her husband. The nurse told her that her husband rode with her in the ambulance, and Shawn told her, quote, "That was not my husband." It then said Shawn did not press charges, which is so sad for her. It's heartbreaking that so many women felt they didn't want to turn him in or that they wouldn't be believed or listened to anyways. So it seemed like they were just like, why bother? Or maybe they were so afraid of getting themselves into trouble somehow because of their own addiction problems. It hurts my heart for them. It's always been my own opinion in this life that we are all addicted to something. Whether it be porn, gambling, church, or religion, social media is now becoming an addiction for some people, but it's just the unfortunate ones who end up addicted to drugs or alcohol. That's just my opinion. Don't come for me. Sowell's house was deemed to be a house of horrors, located in Cleveland, Ohio, on the cross streets of Imperial and 123rd Street. Apparently, there had been numerous neighbors that had complained of a smell coming from the area of his house, but it was believed that authorities chalked it up to an establishment called Ray's Sausage that was next to Sowell's house. He was also located across from a liquor store called Imperial Beverages. The man who owned this liquor store was on the documentary saying that he knew Sowell and that he would come in to buy cigarettes and ice cream. The man said that Sowell was always respectful and polite, And at first, the owner thought Sowell was high class and a normal guy for about 2 years. Then the owner, Assad, said Sowell seemed to change into a completely different person, saying that he didn't shave and that he looked like a crackhead. Then the man went on to say something that completely shocked and horrified me. This man, Assad Taya, said that he was not ashamed to say this, but that he wished we had 1 million people like Anthony Sowell. He then said he was speaking the truth over here, knowing that he was in front of 4 cameras. When the interviewer asked what he meant by that, Assad said, quote, "He clean up the garbage. He clean up those garbage." When the interviewer said, quote, "Who's the garbage?" Assad said, quote, "The one he killed, those garbage," end quote. Excuse me? Who the fuck are you to decide who should live or die? And who the fuck are you to judge people? Oh my God, I could not believe that this fucker said that. I was absolutely disgusted. Some of the women Sowell killed had families, had children. One of the children of these victims was on the documentary, remembering his mother, and this douchebag just called his mother garbage and said that he was glad that Anthony Sowell was taking out the garbage. Ugh. Needless to say, he wasn't on the documentary again after that statement. There was an account from a woman named Gladys that she was attacked by Sowell but managed to escape and ran to the pizza place nearby and asked them to call the police for her to get some help. The pizza establishment asked her to leave because she was getting blood on their floor. Like, what? Then, when she was finally able to file the police report, they told her that it was going to be her word against his. They showed pictures of her attack, and there were clear ligature marks on her neck and cuts and bruises on her arms. But in the report, the police reported there was insufficient evidence. This is when, on the documentary, the woman stated that to police and other people, that, quote, women on drugs are nothing. In the report from Gladys, where the file has an area that states, quote, steps taken to locate or reach the victim, it was filled out from Gladys's report saying, quote, not credible. Anthony Sowell would go on to kill 6 more women after Gladys made her report. 6 more women. Like, what in the actual fuck? It's always going to be the predator's word against the woman's. The pictures they took in her report were straight up clear as day that she was attacked. Bruises, cuts, ligature marks on her neck, and she was bleeding. Gladys said she has nightmares every day and still doesn't sleep at all. She said this has affected her love life and her relationship with her husband. She said she sleeps fully clothed and sometimes on the couch, and there are times that she doesn't want to be touched in any capacity. She has been with her husband for 9 years and she still struggles. I wish these women could get help. I think that the police department should be offering these women counseling as a quote-unquote sorry for not doing what they should have been doing and getting this man off the streets. Authorities have been accused of slow responses when it comes to this case, and this is also shown in the fact that some of the victims of Sowell were not even reported missing. Others stated that they couldn't get the police to open up cases or investigations for their loved ones because some have said to have struggled with addiction or mental health issues, which is sickening. One of the investigative reporters at the time who covered the Sowell case actually said, quote, many of the families went to police and the police wouldn't even take the report, end quote. It was also stated that if the police actually did take the report, that the families kept having to be persistent and that the media wouldn't cover any of their missing family members. I remember one report saying that they were upset that the news was covering that, like, Christmas lawn ornaments were being stolen, but that they wouldn't even cover the fact that their family member was missing. On October 29th, 2009, there were 4 decomposing bodies found on Sowell's 3rd floor of his house. Another 2 victims' bodies were found in the basement of his house. And an additional 5 more bodies were found buried in his backyard. Until these bodies were found, none of the 11 victims' disappearances were investigated by police. None. Here are the names and dates of the known victims of Anthony Sowell and what the victims are remembered for so that we can honor their memory. It's easy to think of these cases as stories sometimes. I think it's important on the episode to dive into the victims a little because some people have a skewed view of drug addicts as maybe less than or not people because they are easy to give up on, and they forget that they may have not always been that way. So November 10th, 2008, Tanya Carmichael, aged 53, according to her family and friends, Tony loved life and worked hard for a long time to provide for her 2 daughters. She was a medical secretary and a bartender as well. She had earned her barber and real estate licenses. After Tonya gave birth to her 3rd child, which was a boy, it was at this time that she unfortunately became addicted to drugs. May 17th, 2007, Crystal Dozier, 25, who we know the story from, one of her children. Crystal apparently had 7 children of her own. Crystal's mother described Crystal as her responsible child and her quote-unquote little mother hen. However, after one of Crystal's children had died, this is when she would start to struggle with drug addiction, which is felt that Sowell probably ended up preying upon. This is heart-wrenching, and I can't imagine losing a child and can completely understand turning to drugs or alcohol to help with the pain. This is why mental health is so damn important. Maybe if these women had had some help with whatever was going on with them, maybe these could have had different endings. It's so sad. In June of 2008, Tashana Culver, aged 33, was a mother. She was said to have spent many years without stable housing before Tashana rebuilt her life and had moved into a small apartment on her own in Cleveland, which is awesome because you have to start somewhere in your life when you rebuild it. I have absolutely been there myself. Her family remembers acts of kindness from Tashana, which included bringing plates of food to people who lived in their vehicles. And let me tell you, when somebody like Tashana, who doesn't have much to herself, but she was able to give to others like that, it's absolutely kind and it's awesome. Unfortunately, Tashana had drifted in and out of her family's lives with her drug addiction. I don't believe that she was reported missing. August of 2008, Leshonda Long was a mother of 3 herself. Her aunt called her, quote, strong-willed and sassy in an interview about her niece. Unfortunately, like we have heard from her mother, drugs were a part of her life. She was only 24 when she died, although one source said she was 17. So there were some conflicting counts, but in my own opinion, I don't see a 17-year-old having 3 children, so I'm guessing she was more like 24. She was the youngest of Sowell's victims, either way, and at the scene of these women's deaths, only Leshonda's skull was found, and the rest of her body is still missing. On October 8th, 2008, Michelle Mason was 45. She was said to have spent some time in New York and New Jersey and occasionally checked in with her family. She was said to have returned to Cleveland to try to attempt to turn her life around from being a drug addict. In 2008, Michelle's family reported her disappearance to the police, but they too found the response to be slow and there was a lack of media coverage. Michelle's family said that up until she went missing, her years towards the end of her life were full of personal peace and happiness. January 17th, 2009, Kim Smith was 44. She was said to have taken care of her disabled father and took him to doctor's appointments as well as cleaned and cooked for him. Her friends last saw Kim 3 days before her 44th birthday and described her as a person who enjoyed singing and was quote-unquote artsy. April 24th, 2009, Nancy Cobb was 44. She was said to have spiraled, unfortunately, into the drug world, and she also spent some time in prison. Later on in life, she had felt that she wasn't the best mother to her children, so she devoted herself to her own grandchildren, which were said to be 5 of them. Somewhere along the line, she was said to have befriended Anthony Sowell, who lived in the same neighborhood as Nancy. Her family said they have known of him, but they didn't think he was dangerous. Spring of 2009, Imelda Amy Hunter, 47, was a beautician and a mother to 3. Her sister described Amy as a fighter and said her family says that she was also known to be a bookworm who loved to read the classics. Unfortunately, like most of the rest of these women, she had a drug addiction problem as well. June 2009, Janice Webb was 49. She was remembered as being quote-unquote the family jokester who loved to pull pranks. It was also said that in 1995, after she had gone on a trip to LA, her life had taken a dark turn. After this, she started using drugs and spent time in jail for a variety of crimes. Her sister even said during her times battling her drug addiction, she was still said to have kept her family together. June 3rd, 2009, Talasia, I'm sorry if I butchered that, Fortson, 31, was said to be an adopted child herself, and even though she was loved, she could never overcome her feelings of abandonment. I can understand that abandonment is a bitch, and when you're looking for some sense of stability or love, you can get into not great situations. It was said that she often ran away from home when she was a teenager. She then became addicted to drugs around this same time, and she lost custody of her children because of it. In the early part of June 2009, she was trying to turn her life around and unfortunately vanished. And finally, in September 2009, Diane Turner, who was 38, who was a mother of 6, battled with drugs most of her life. It was said that she entered rehab programs on and off and remained clean and sober. People knew her as a good person and unfortunately had broken relationships with her family. Anthony Sowell ended up being convicted of 84 of the 85 crimes that he was being charged with. During his trial, the fact that he was a Marine was brought up. As for Sowell's military service, the man who testified was a U.S. Marine, Walter Bansley III, who testified as a military expert, and this man had served 20 years in the Marine Corps. Sowell's defense attorney questioned Mr. Bansley about many awards and promotions that Sowell had received in the Marines. Mr. Bansley testified to the fact that Sowell was good, that Sowell was in the Marines from the year 1978 to 1985, and that he was promoted to sergeant and received 2 Good Conducts Award, but that he was busted back to corporal before he was honorably discharged. Mr. Bansley said, quote, "He did exceptionally well, I have to say. One of the first things that stood out, and one of the reasons I agreed to come here, was to point out to you that Mr. Sowell was promoted meritoriously to private first class, which is an extreme distinction," end quote. I read right after that the defense had paid this man $1,400 to come interpret Sowell's service record, and it was the first time that he had ever testified for a Marine in any trial. Of course, after this, the prosecution had a few questions and comments about Sowell's military time. There was said to be a spicy exchange between the prosecutor Rick Bombick and Mr. Bansley, as Bombick asked about the amount of time that Sowell had been missing from duty while he was in service in Okinawa, Japan. And he also asked about 2 disciplinary incidents. Bombick asked Mr. Bansley, quote, "Does the aggravated murder of 11 women honor the Marine Corps?" To which Mr. Bansley said he had not seen that in the record book. After this, there was a neuropsychiatrist that testified that a heart attack that Sowell suffered back in 2007 had a quote-unquote profound effect on his physical and mental state, to which Bombick asked if Sowell had a physical problem, then how was he able to bury bodies in his backyard? Speaking of finding bodies in his home, it was said that they had found a skull in the basement that was inside a paper bag in a bucket. They went on to say that there were no marks that indicated the head would have been dismembered with tools. So how in the fuck was this head detached from its body? On July 22nd, 2011, a jury convicted Sowell of murder, rape, kidnapping, tampering with evidence, abuse of a corpse, and he was then sentenced to death later on. On February 8th, 2021, Anthony Sowell, aged 61, actually died of a terminal illness in a end-of-life care unit at the Ohio Prison System's Franklin Medical Center in Columbus. Good. I hope he suffered before he died, and I'm not even sorry. So apparently the city of Cleveland did pay out $1.3 million in settlements to the families of Sowell's victims because of their poor handling of the cases, which, good. They should. Anthony Sowell's home was actually demolished in 2011, and then in 2021, there was a memorial called the Garden of 11 Angels, and this was unveiled on the site of his home to honor the victims. And that, my friends, is the sick, disturbing, and horrible story of Anthony Sowell, rapist, murderer, crackhead, and body mutilator. My heart goes out to any of his victims' families that had to learn that their loved ones was one of the 11 bodies that was found at his home. This story stuck out as one that I wanted to do because of the carelessness that these poor women were treated with when it came to the police. I was horrified for them. They were not treated well in this case, nor the police reporting their loved ones missing in this case. It was awful. Again, I ask your opinion. How do you feel about the police not looking for people who are addicts or have mental health problems? Do you lean towards that these people live the riskier lifestyle and we can't use the manpower or police resources to constantly look for people who could just be strung out somewhere and not wanting to be found? Or do you lean towards the fact that these are still people and the police should be doing everything in their power to find these people regardless of their lifestyles? Let me know in the comments or on social media on a post about this episode. I'm curious about your opinions on this matter. Myself, personally, I'm torn. I mean, people are people, and they should be treated as such whether they are addicts or not, and whether they have mental health issues or not. They still deserve basic rights and basic human rights. But then again, I also see the other side where it's hard because I know sometimes there are people who just don't want to be found, or just go on a drug or alcohol bender and don't bother to tell the people that they love, and they're not necessarily missing or hurt, they're just unfortunately addicts. So it's such a gray area for me that I don't know what the answer is. That's it for today's episode, you guys. Join me next Monday for another episode of The Kill File, and thank you so much for hanging out today. Stay safe, you guys. Bye! Well, that's it for today, guys. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today and listening to another episode of The Kill File. If you want to share your thoughts on what we covered today, suggest a case for me to check out, or if you're just bored and looking for something to do, you can head over to The Kill File's social medias and reach out. We're on Facebook and Instagram as The Kill File, and we're on YouTube and TikTok as The Kill File Podcast. Also, feel free to check out our website at thekillfile.com, where you can learn more about me, your host, and a little bit more about how The Kill File got started. I love hearing from you guys. Come back on Mondays, wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts, when we will cover another case on The Kill File, where nothing stays buried forever. Stay safe, you guys. Bye!